With the 2024-2025 academic year here and gone, in an overwhelming majority, I want to say overwhelming majority because you can never say totally complete, but overwhelming majority of the portal action for West Virginia football and basketball in the books, the West Virginia baseball team takes center stage for the attention of Mountaineer Nation as we hit the end of the regular season and near the always climactic postseason. And it's awesome that we are talking about a postseason for this West Virginia baseball team in this really modern age since former head coach Randy Mazey was at the helm over 12 years ago. So thanks for tuning in for this edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. I'm Carson Fox, and here is where the team is here in the year of our Lord 2025 as we approach the last full week of the regular season. The good, and that's what I'll kind of title this section for West Virginia. The good news is West Virginia is 16th in the country according to Division1Baseball.com. That thankfully after those the series loss to Kansas State this past weekend and a non-conference loss to the dreaded Pitt Panthers didn't knock the Mountaineers down in the national rankings all of that much. Still in the top 16 in the country, which is pivotal, absolutely pivotal for hosting a regional. So number one team in the Big 12 standings with a 76% win percentage in conference play. I'm not going to give you the records because the total number of conference games that West Virginia has versus its other conference opponents are not equal. So, unfortunately, some games were canceled for West Virginia. I can talk about 2 or 3 from that Oklahoma State series back in mid-March. So, again, conference winning percentage being the most important thing here. They hold a 2-game, and now I say that, but I go back to what people most recognize as really a 2-game lead over the number 2 team in the Big 12 standings, the Arizona State Sun Devils, for the regular season title. West Virginia faces the number tied for 3rd team in the Big 12 standings, the Kansas Jayhawks, this weekend at home, with the Jayhawks needing a sweep to jump the Mountaineers for any chance at a Big 12 title, or could potentially be in for a share with, say, Arizona State for the Big 12 title. Kind of depends upon what the Sun Devils do. While Arizona State takes on the number 8 team in the Big 12 standings, the former preseason favorite, but a 500 ball club in Oklahoma State in Stillwater, in those series, in West Virginia's as well, Saturday through Thursday. And Arizona State facing a 30-win Grand Canyon team at home Tuesday night. So be nice to see whether Arizona, how they used their pitching in that contest, wanting to win it's not a conference game, but a Grand Canyon team that won a regional this past year, so not just like some pushover program. Meanwhile, West Virginia tied a single-season program wins record in its win Saturday over Kansas State, tying the 1994 team that won the Atlantic 10 Conference and an NCAA tournament game, as well as the 2023 team that held a share of the Big 12 regular season title, but really, unfortunately, we can all recall this was just 2 seasons ago, imploded with a losing series sweep to Texas to end the regular season, then an 0-2 showing in the Big 12 tournament and a 1-2 showing in the Lexington Regional, not winning a game against either the second or the third or first team seeded in that regional, just coming up with a win over Ball State, who was the 4 seed in that regional. So already a historic season for the Mountaineer baseball program and first-year head coach Steve Sabins, but you can't help but feel a little bit of deja vu if you're a Mountaineer fan and the Bobby Bowden curse peering out through the trees. If you're not familiar with what I've said a few times on my channel, feeling as if West Virginia, unfortunately, whenever Mountaineer fans, and I'm going to blame my dad's generation because he said he was in school whenever this happened, Mountaineer fans burned Bobby Bowden in effigy back in the late 70s. We can all remember he left town, went to Florida State, ended up becoming, at that point in time when he retired, the winningest head coach in college football history, national titles for the Seminoles, and it was, kind of way back then, I feel like, that you can track to. I know it had we talk about the modern era of Mountaineer athletics being around 1980, with Don Nealon coming in as head football coach. But that is the running kind of like joke that I say, that anytime you feel as if, man, West Virginia just can't get over the hump to winning a national championship, or because we're West Virginia, we can't have nice things, I blame that on the Bobby Bowden curse. So for this baseball program, going 6-6 over the last 3 weeks, losing to rivals Penn State, Marshall, and Pitt in non-conference midweek play, and losing just its second Big 12 series of the season this past weekend at Kansas State. And this was really the second prove-it part of the 2025 Mountaineers schedule. The first one coming there in mid to late March with the Big 12 opening series on the road at Oklahoma State. West Virginia won one game, but 2 of those 3 games were canceled due to tornadoes and weather in the state of Oklahoma. Then the following weekend, West Virginia lost 2 of 3 at home versus Arizona. A team that we know made a regional this past season, came in, I think, the number 2 team in the Big 12 preseason standings. Unfortunately, it went down to a 16-inning game that West Virginia fell on the wrong side of the end of. Won the middle game, lost the third on Saturday. Unfortunately, now snapping back here to the last couple of weeks, West Virginia's defense, namely its pitching, is not holding up its end of the bargain for an offense that's still top 40 in the nation in runs scored per game and team batting average. Plus, the Mountaineers have unfortunately developed the 9th inning yips with the loss in Charleston versus Marshall, at Pitt, and Friday night's game at Kansas State, all falling apart late. I don't know what was more infuriating, the loss to the dreaded Panthers. Yeah, it had to have been that, but a team that's terrible, or a K-State program, you go up 7-2, want to set the tone there in a conference road series that we've been talking about for about a month or so. This Kansas State and Kansas series coming down to the wire can be really instrumental, I feel like, for West Virginia's resume and solidifying it for the RPI and for the national voters and the committee who picked the regional sites. So what I'll say, just a couple of things. I don't want to really belabor this point because baseball's baseball. You're only as good as your next day starting pitcher. But what I will say is just trust this lineup. Having watched the Mountaineers really solid, I feel like just about every game for the last month now, is this lineup can still hold up its end of the bargain, as I say. This is a veteran lineup, 1 through 9, that's going to be feared in the postseason because they've all stayed hot all year long and have postseason experience. So, you look at the big boys, especially in the SEC, if you look at the top, 20 in the country, they're completely littered with SEC teams. That when they play a team like a West Virginia, all of these guys have gotten to the super regional last year and were pivotal, a part of that lineup. That's going to strike fear in opposing pitchers because they've been there before. First and foremost, who I want to talk about, who's absolutely on fire right now, is Kyle West. 6 for 12 with 5 RBIs and 3 runs scored on 2 extra base hits in that Kansas State series. Also a new guy from last year's team, but what an unsung hero. I feel like this will kind of get lost in the annals of WVU football WVU athletics history, but what an incredible one-year addition in outfielder Jace Reinhardt. What a stud. What, like, the ad that you absolutely needed for this lineup. Kind of a slow start getting inserted into the everyday lineup, but now hitting in the middle of the order this past weekend, going 6 for 10 with 4 RBIs, 7 runs scored on 5 extra base hits. He's been outstanding all season long. And Sam White having the go-ahead 3-run home run late in Sunday's K-State game. I know it was a loss, but when you need a big shot, he gave you the shot in the arm. And he was capitalizing on a 5 for 13 weekend, just like I'm saying. There's really no holes in this lineup. You have guys who get on base, have speed, take extra bases on the base pass. You have some power hitters. Pin Reinhardt, also Grant Hussey at first base. Just veterans who have seen, good pitching and will tattoo the ball. So I really trust in this lineup. They haven't shown any signs. It doesn't matter the opponent, good or bad, all season. Now it seems like sometimes if you get that if it's going to be a close, I don't know how to explain this, but a phenomenon of like, with football, if you're going to go into a high scoring affair, it turns into that. Or if it's going to be a low scoring affair, that's what you see out of West Virginia. Like sometimes West Virginia's bats go quiet in a pitcher's duel, and then in sometimes where you're playing lesser competition and they score a whole bunch of runs on the board and they're winning games in the double digits. So it's just very, very interesting to me the way I feel like this last month or so has gone following this team from the game script, if you want to try and relate it to football in some different way. Now, what I want to really focus on for the last bit of this video, pitching fixes. I am no savant. I am going to, played baseball pretty much all my life, have a great feel for the game, and like getting into college baseball over these last 10 years or so following Mountaineer baseball. The college game, a little bit different than the pro game, so trying to understand the different nuances and things of that nature, and just especially the way that specialized pitching is anymore, and the use of relievers. But have to, at this point in time in the season, this is like a whole new season for head coach Steve Sabins. For all the way from back to mid-February to now, so 3 full months, West Virginia has been running a marathon. They've been trying to figure out all these, how do these young guys get incorporated. At first, we were starting Robbie Porco into the starting weekend series. Gavin Van Kempen being involved. I'll come back to him in just a second. But there's been a lot of changes. Getting how Chase Myers being used, Carson Estrich being used, and then some of the young guys, Max Stifler, a guy I talked about in the preseason. So figuring out who are your top 3, who are your relievers, who's your setup 8th inning man, who's your closer in the 9th. And now, because West Virginia has this series Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they've already clinched a top 4 seed at minimum for next week's Big 12 tournament in Arlington, Texas, West Virginia can really play with whoever they want for the remainder of the stretch. So don't have to really worry about how much rest that you're getting. It's also a single elimination Big 12 tournament, so a very interesting component to this year, as previously it was a double elimination tournament. So you have to manage pitching a little bit differently in a double elimination tournament versus a single. So I think this is where today, tomorrow, all the way in, looking through this series of how Steve Sabins wants to script his starting pitching starting this weekend, and then it's going to come like a blink of an eye with getting to Arlington for the Big 12 tournament, depending upon how that goes. And then West Virginia will be in a regional, just want to get to a point where they host. So I'd throw Griffin Kern on Thursday. Most probably going to go against Dom Vogele of Kansas. Cooper Moore has a lower ERA than Vogele, but Vogele being their Friday starter, so I would imagine he's going to go against Kern. Here's where I would make a little bit of a difference. On Friday, depending upon how that game goes, I'd throw Jack Cartsonas, because you just want to have some breathing room to, just kind of leave Saturday up for debate. You always want to win every single game out there. But if your best 2 starters, it feels like at this point in the season, Kern clearly this team's ace. Cartsonas, I know he had a rough outing on Sunday, but he's been money, it seems like, over these last 3-4 weeks. I would throw him second. If he goes against Cooper Moore, who knows? You take the first 2 of the series. You can play with the way how Saturday goes. But I think he's probably behind Kern, the second guy you'd want to toss in this series. And then if Kern's your guy for your first game in your Big 12 tournament, and then, technically waste him for that, Cartsonas is going to have probably an entire week off. I mean, so would Kern, but you see what I'm saying. Give both of those guys at least a week's rest in between this start against Kansas and what happens in the Big 12 tournament. So then Saturday, reading some of the reports, I mean, the news has kind of gone quiet on him, but a couple weekends ago, West Virginia was playing in Orlando against UCF. Gavin Van Kempen, I think it was Saturday's game, only went 1/3 of an inning. Got kind of blown up, shaky, walked a few guys. West Virginia went up, I think, like 3 runs or 4 runs in the first inning. Van Kempen gets the start and just can't get anybody out. So he gets pulled after just a third, and we haven't really seen him since. Reports are after that game, and kind of like what you can read online, is that he's dealing with some sort of a shoulder injury. Now, again, the last couple of starts prior to that, it seems as if he had started to figure some things out. Some stuff that I was reading up about him was that he was really focusing on trying to get ahead in counts against batters, and really would have his worst in the first inning. Someone who's experienced that myself growing up, throwing through Pony League and into high school ball. I can understand that. Nothing really just hurts your psyche and I would say just confidence as a starting pitcher than when you get tagged in the first inning. So I think this is an opportunity if in a low, potentially leverage situation, if West Virginia wins 1 or 2 of those first Thursday or Friday games, to throw Van Kempen in a Saturday game, because you're going to need him. Unless for some reason Sabins thinks that it would be better off giving him another potentially week's worth of rest for that shoulder injury to gear up for the Big 12 tournament and or postseason play. West Virginia is going to need him. They are going to need 3 starters minimum. You'd like to have more. You'd like to have a little bit of flexibility depending upon what happens in a regional, but you'd like to be able to go in with at least 3 starters. Because that's kind of the way college baseball goes. So Van Kempen's been a guy who hasn't been his best. I went through my notes and talking about who was going to be kind of the projected one for West Virginia baseball going into the season. Didn't think Kern was going to come out of nowhere and be this hot for this program. Instead, thought it would be Max Yeel. He went down with an injury. Tommy John out for the season. So you thought Van Kempen was going to be your guy. So you can't, I feel like, maximize on the potential of this postseason run without him. So you go Kern, Cartsonas, Van Kempen, guys I like kind of in longer relief roles who I think have been pitching decently as of late. Reese Bassinger, Ben Hudson. This is where it really comes down to, I don't know, whether you trust past history, veteran presence, in a guy like Carson Estridge for the 8th inning role, which what I would kind of advocate for him here. I think, 8th, 9th inning, while, the closer role, like a Kenny Powers, always gets the fame and, coming out there and throwing gas. I really just like the savvy veteran presence of a guy like Carson Estridge in that 8th inning role. It seemed like he's been fluctuating, kind of didn't know what he was going to do. Didn't start out as a starter, then after the first couple of series of the season, moved into the starter's role, back into a relief role. Chase Meyer takes that closer's role 9th, and that's where I would put Meyer, just a bulldog gunner out there, and just so that's kind of where I feel like I'd love to know your thoughts here on YouTube. Leave your comments, whether you like an Estridge in the 8th or you like a Meyer in the 8th with an Estridge in the 9th. I think those 7 guys right there. So, Kern, Cartsonas, Van Kempen in your kind of starter roles, but you could play around depending upon how the games go with Ben Hudson, Reese Bassinger, perhaps in longer relief roles, or if one guy gets nicked up early as this postseason stretch goes along. Estridge and Meyer in your late innings guy, high leverage situation, save situations. That's what I like there. So I think West Virginia needs all 7 of these guys, and they need to peak at the right times. So right now, doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like these guys are peaking. I don't want to say they peaked too early, because you know what I mean. Like, you look at the strength of schedule for this West Virginia team, and I really don't want to go down the rabbit hole of as to whether you're trying to say West Virginia, is fraudulent, or looking through the schedule and they just beat up on a lot of weak teams, because that is factual. There's nothing that can be argued about that. But the way they just play good quality baseball, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and when they've needed good starting pitching, they've gotten it. They've gotten it out of Kern. They've gotten it out of Cartsonas, Van Kempen at times this season. And the non-conference play from the two guys that I've mentioned, and, Estrich and Meyer have kind of figured it out. I'm very curious as to why Meyer has come out of that ninth inning role that it seems like he was really locking down in the month of April to come in and be a starter, whether it's because of that injury to Van Kempen rather than going to one of these other guys. So very curious to see. And then just I wish I also had just the go to the West Virginia Swami and say, Swami, how does West Virginia get out of these ninth inning like psychological mental blocks that they've run into and just close out teams? Doesn't really matter what kind of eventual lead that West Virginia's had. Just losing to Pitt in the fashion that they did in Kansas State was just absolutely maddening. It's like you draw some stuff on Twitter only to, hit delete at the very end of what you want to say. So I'm willing to give this team the benefit of the doubt if they can come to the friendly confines of Kendrick Family Ballpark. They have the Big 12 regular season in their grasp. This is what you play for as competitors. If your head coach Steve Saban's one of the upperclassmen leaders on this team, anyone involved with this program, I know. I'm drawing a blank on who their one coach is, who was the former second baseman who played for the Cardinals and the San Diego Padres. I got to look it up here just because this is going to drive me crazy. Jed Jerko. Yeah, if you're Jed Jerko and you've been a part of some historic Mountaineer programs, played in the major leagues, this is where I feel like you huddle up as a team. It's a us against the world kind of mentality out there. The Big 12 Conference isn't going to, boost the PR of this program, even though West Virginia is the only team in the conference represented in the top 25 national rankings and has any prospect of hosting a regional next week or 2 weeks from now. So it's kind of an us against the world mentality. This is where you disrupt. This is where you cut against the grain. This is where you carve your own path in trying to make this month of May, maybe even into the month of June, something memorable. This is an incredible run. I feel like that this program has been on, hasn't skipped a beat at all from head coach Randy Mazey retiring over to Steve Saban's, J.J. Weatherholt no longer with this program, and we talked about all of the pitching that West Virginia lost from last season, and Derek Clark, Tyler Switowski, Aiden Major, Hayden Cooper no longer a part of this program. So to get to a program record for wins, I didn't expect, I don't think anybody maybe outside this team expected that. I mean, being top 4 in the Big 12, I said this going in. If they could match what they did this past season, I'd love that. Absolutely would love that. But the way that the schedule broke, that quantity over quality means more. I would love to see West Virginia get to 43 wins, sweep the Jayhawks, go into postseason play, with a whole lot of momentum. You sweep this series right now, I don't care really what West Virginia does in the Big 12 tournament. You'd like to see them win, especially, if they're going up against a 4-seeded, Kansas again, or could try and get, I don't know. I would like, let me step back and say that. I would like to see West Virginia have a really nice showing in Arlington for once, to put, you've won the conference potentially by 2 games or more. So to go in as the number 1 seeded program and have a good showing, you obviously want to see that. But if West Virginia can sweep, maybe that secures enough of a resume that you've built up enough to then have the chops with division, all the decision makers out there to host a regional. So to get back to that level and hosting a regional, which they haven't done for a few years now, that's awesome. That is something. Hang a banner, Big 12 regular season champion, hosting a regional. That is what you play for. So I love that. And then, if you win the Big 12 title on top of that, Big 12 tournament title on top of that, that's gravy, baby. Love that. So, love to know your thoughts. How you feeling about this Mountaineer team down the stretch of this? Are you feeling kind of the PTSD that I have felt in times that I talked about with the Bobby Bowden curse? Is like, here we go again. West Virginia has all that it, everything out in front of them, and then they just either choke or just piss away an opportunity. Or are you really behind this program as I am? Really want to see them sweep Kansas this weekend, put on a great showing. I'm sure, even with it being a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, definitely would think Friday and Saturday going to be awesome showings at Kendrick Family Ballpark. Have all intents and purposes of coming to Saturday's game. So if you see me somewhere in the crowd or at the ballpark, love to stop and say hi. And just thanks for tuning in for this video, being a subscriber to my channel, but love to know your thoughts on the final home stretch of the regular season and postseason play for this Mountaineer baseball team, no matter how it goes. We'll preview the Big 12 tournament next week, and then, see how that all goes to then talk about the, national postseason play afterwards. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hail West Virginia. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. Hail West Virginia.